It's not commonly known that you're a very accomplished musician, guitar player, piano player. Is this part of your self-emptying technique that helps you take on a role? Is it like a meditative thing to play music?
Well, I guess yeah, I guess it's sort of a meditative technique, but it goes way back. I was a musician long before I was an actor. When I went to college, I was going to write operas. I was studying music theory, and I just kind of drifted into acting, sort of accidentally.
Your father, the famous legendary screen idol, John Carradine, actually suggested you don't go into acting. Is that right? Why?
No.
Is it a case of don't do as I do as I say?
No, he didn't really ever say that. He didn't exactly encourage me. First time I ever appeared on stage, he was there watching me, and from that point on, he encouraged me a lot. But I think he just wanted me to go my own way. He didn't want to influence me.
And a word of any direction at that age can influence someone very strongly.
Well, I was 22. Actually, I was more influenced by the fact that my girlfriend was really excited about my performance. And I thought, well, this is the way to get girls.
Certainly worked out in your case.
Well, I think that's true with a lot of people, particularly musicians. Most of the great musicians I know have told me that the reason they started playing guitar was because they thought they could get girls.
So your film, rather stage debut was in San Francisco, was it?
Well, close. It was in Berkeley, which is right across the bay.
Shakespeare?
Uh-huh. Romeo and Juliet.
Who'd you play?
Tybalt. He's the bad guy.
Why bad guy? Why were you cast as a bad guy to start with?
Because I was a great fencer. Tybalt has to be a great fencer because he makes Romeo and Mercutio look good. The way you usually do a Shakespearean play, you cast a pretty boy as Romeo and a guy who can talk a lot as Mercutio. And they both have to fight Tybalt. And what Tybalt does is, the way you usually do it is he does 2 moves to the other guy's 1. And it makes, in other words, Tybalt's going like this, and the other guy's going, makes him look really good.
So you're thrashing.
Yeah, well, the better fencer has to play the bad guy, is the general way.
Your dancing lessons probably helped you out a lot in your theater and in your later acting career. Was this true already? Did you not take dancing lessons?
Yeah, I was pretty serious about that for a while. I studied ballet and tap and folk forms and all kinds of stuff like that. It helped me a hell of a lot when I came around to doing Kung Fu, because I had all these moves.
In Kung Fu, they had extremely experimental techniques for stunts. You had slow motion photography. You had a choreographed stunts, fighting scenes. In fact, at one point, I believe there's a scene in which spears come flying at you, and you have to knock them all away, one at a time, and then catch one.
Yeah.
Did you do that, or did you have a stand-in doing that?
No, I did it. If you go back and look at the footage, it's quite obvious I did it. You know how I did it? I just did it. Turns out it's kind of easy.
How did you get that role for a Kung Fu?
Well, I took a couple of meetings, and the guy who was the executive producer at that, actually for the pilot, he was the producer director, had seen me in a play in New York called The Royal Hunt of the Sun, where I was playing the Emperor of the Incas, which is kind of related. And he remembered it. It was about 5 or 6 years later when this script crossed my path. But he already pretty much had decided that I was who he wanted. Then I had a couple of meetings with him, and it just became clear. Actually, I was probably the only actor in Los Angeles, or in America, maybe in the world, I don't know, who was as prepared to do that part. I had the philosophy, I had the knowledge, I'd done all the reading, and I had all this dance training, training and fighting of various different kinds, fencing, etc. I mean, I had the moves, and I had the acting experience and the knowledge.
I'd like to come back to Kung Fu in a minute, but you mentioned that performance as the Inca chief. Now,
Emperor, actually.
Emperor?
Emperor, yeah.
Atahualpa Kappa.
Atahualpa Capac.
I could never pronounce that stuff. No.
Atahualpa.
Oh, Atahualpa.
Yeah, that's, well, anybody calls him. He had like 8 names. Atahualpa.
At this point, were you already very selective about your roles? You were trying to find something that was back in Broadway in New York for this.
No, I was coming out of the woodwork. I was a non-working actor looking for a job, any job. But actually, that season I was offered about 5 different parts, and the one I chose to go for was Atahualpa. But they were doing A Lion in Winter. I was offered a part in that, and there were a couple of musicals, and I turned them all down and went for this one.
You were doing television at that time already too, weren't you?
Well, I had done a lot of television. I was under contract to Universal. I'd done a screen test, you know, like in the old days. I was maybe the last person that came into Hollywood on a screen test. But it was not going anyplace. I was playing small parts and villains, and I thought it would just go on like that forever, so I went back to Broadway.
You have played your share of villains, but one of your first major TV roles was as Shane in 1966, the sort of Robin Hood-style Western cowboy fellow. Was this a role that you aggressively went after?
No, not actually. This was right after The Royal Hunt of the Sun, where I played the Inca Emperor, and they just, well, I was offered 2 television series. One was a thing called Hawk, which was to be done in New York, where I would play an Indian cop.
Hindu Indian or North American Indian?
North American Indian. And I thought that was kind of dumb, that they didn't have enough imagination. Just because I was playing an Indian. They wanted me to play an Indian. And I really didn't want to play a cop. And I was in the middle of a divorce. And when they offered me this thing in Los Angeles, which is home to me, you know, it's where I was born, I thought if I went to Los Angeles, at least I wouldn't have to play a cop or an Indian again. And then I'd escape from the ravages of the divorce. So I took it. That's really how it happened. But I didn't campaign for it. They just offered it to me.
You put a signature to that role, though, didn't you? You played it in a certain way.
Yeah, I try to push into the future. I played him with kind of long hair, and he was kind of wild. He wasn't like your old style Western hero. Nothing like Alan Ladd. And I think it was a little too early. I've always been a little ahead of my time. But, you know, it's funny because it was basically a failure in the United States. But today, you go to places like, you know, Central Africa or South America or Spain or Asia, and it's a big hit series.